Hello everyone, Happy New Year. Welcome to the first video of 2022. It's been a while since I made one, and I wanted to make this video for a couple of reasons. One of which is to send some encouragement and some motivation to all of you wonderful dissidents out there, all of you beautiful, brave souls who, despite everything that has happened and despite everything that is happening, you have stood strong in what you believe and in what you know, and you remain pure blood, unjected, injection free, whatever term you want to use. I think you know what I'm talking about. So I want to say that I salute you and well done. Keep going. You have held fast despite the threats, despite the tribulations and the difficulties. You have held your own, and as we enter this new year, you remain pure of mind, pure of spirit, and importantly, pure of body. So I just wanted to send a message of respect to you and give you a pat on the back. You deserve it. We deserve it. I include myself in this. I am with you in this condition of being unjected and what that entails nowadays. And I know how difficult it can be. So my respect, my salute to you. Keep going. Don't give in. Hold the line. And know that you are not alone. And I admire what you have done in resisting up until now, and I encourage you to keep resisting. So last year, right around this time exactly, I think, today is the 8th of January. Actually, I think I'm coming up to past midnight here, so now I think it's the 9th. Last year I made a video right around the same time and date. In that video I made some predictions for what we could expect in 2021. And I pretty much got everything right. I mentioned in that video that it's actually quite difficult to make predictions nowadays because things are so tumultuous and topsy-turvy and you don't really know what to expect. But at the same time, it's actually kind of easy to make predictions. All you have to do is just imagine worst case scenarios, then go beyond that, and you'll probably get everything right. And I don't say that with any sort of happiness. This is bitter laughter. This is gallows humor. But I think that it is what it is. If you want to make accurate predictions, just imagine rather bad outcomes. But in any case then, so I did that last year. So I don't think I'm not really interested in doing it again this year. Instead, what I wanted to do in this video was talk more about the present and take stock of what's going on now and where we are. And, over the past few days, there have been quite a few momentous events which occurred. One of which being the fact that the president of France said in an interview that he wanted to piss off the population of France which is not injected. And actually the word he used was emmerder, which has the same etymology as merde, which is like in English shit. So you could translate it as like saying I want to shit on, I want to, or like put in the shit. the unjected French people, French population, French citizens. And that wasn't even the worst of what he said. He then went on to say that, in fact, he doesn't even consider the unjected to be citizens anymore. So you can read between the lines and understand that he is basically saying that the unjected no longer have the rights and protections and liberties that are afforded with citizenship. We have the case of Novak Djokovic, or should I say Novaks Djokovic, who may or may not be injected. I don't actually know, because all he refuses to do, from my understanding, is show whether or not he is. He refuses to show his injection certificate, although he then says that he has an exemption, which that he has provided. So he has an exemption of whether or not to show his certificate, I think. And he has been detained by the Australian government. I'm not sure if they have deported him yet. I'm thinking that they were going to, but he was detained for hours in the Melbourne airport, interrogated, locked in a room for hours, as if he was some sort of terrorist. And last time I checked, he was being held in a hotel, all for the fact of not being injected or not showing his QR code. And it didn't just happen to him. Another tennis player who was going to participate in the Australian Open, a female Russian player, was denied entry into Australia, and not because she has an exemption, but Australia is not going to validate it, or not because she doesn't want to show her injection certificate, or not because she isn't injected in the first place. No, in her case, it's because Australia does not recognize as valid the Russian Sputnik injection, which this tennis player has had. So, again, as if we needed more proof, this clearly has nothing to do with health. It has to do with a lot of other things, but health obviously isn't one of them. And then, I think it was just today, or I suppose yesterday, that we had Andrew Neil, who, again, is someone that's supposedly a conservative voice. Just goes to show that, the old terms and the old allegiances don't mean anything anymore. We're in a different paradigm here. But Andrew Neil, writing in one of Britain's biggest newspapers, says that it's time to punish Britain's refuseniks. And that's his word, punish. Punish the British people who have not received their injection. Or should I say injections now. So let's let that all sink in. We have presidents, politicians, pundits clearly saying that a particular group in society, in a nation, is to blame. And this group deserves punishment. And this group deserves to be in the shit. This group deserves to be denied certain things, like the ability to participate in a tennis competition, or enter a country, or leave a country, or indeed be considered citizens any longer. Now, this is the language that precedes genocide. We know from history that this is the language and the behavior that precedes genocide, that precedes acts of violence and cruelty towards one's fellow countrymen. We can look at many examples. There's one particular example that everyone goes to nowadays, which is, an example from history. It's shrouded in doubts and exaggerations and fabrications, but it did happen to the extent that we can say what did happen or didn't happen, but it did happen. Some things did happen, and not all of it good. I mean, whether or not it was deserved is another question. But we know that this is what happens, that first you have a particular part of the population is singled out. A target is placed on them. They are excised, segregated from the rest of society. And then the punishments, to use Andrew Neil's term, the persecutions continue and escalate until you get to the point where you have this particular group of the population in ghettos, in camps. And this has happened many times. It happened in the Soviet Union as well. If we want to talk about another example that often gets forgotten because everyone else goes to the other example first, because it's been drilled into us through years and years of propaganda. But we know that this is what happened in the Soviet Union during the Bolshevik reign. The singling out of the kulaks, the farming class, the farmers as the enemy, and getting the rest of the nation to put all their hatred on them and view them as the reason why they had so many problems and the source of all their frustrations. And this is clearly what's going on with the Uninjected, that the reason we're all in lockdown is because of those who refuse to get their injections. The reason we can't go back to the way things used to be is because 10% of the population continue to be refuseniks. So we are the persecuted minority now. How does it feel to be a persecuted minority? In a time in which victimhood status has become more valuable than gold, you would think, hey, now is our chance to stand on the podium. But you all very well know that our victimhood, our persecution, our victimization counts for nothing. And in fact, many people are ghoulishly happy to see us being victimized and persecuted. They will applaud. There are so many people applauding what happened to Djokovic. There are plenty of people who applauded and agreed and thought it was based and about time with what Macron said. So, if you've been in the dissident sphere, that if you've been pro-European, that our suffering will not matter, and our cries for justice will fall upon deaf ears. So it's time to get serious. As I said in the video last year, I said that we can expect the turning of the screw. We can expect things to get worse, and they have. The situation is unacceptable. by any standard. And yet it continues and it worsens. So, first of all, the first thing when I say it's time to get serious, the first thing is that it is time to stop arguing amongst ourselves about the seriousness of what is going on. Now, I'm sure many, if not most of you, are aware of the rift that has been going on in our little Cosa Nostra. The rift between those who think that this is all just a big distraction, and what we really should be doing is continuing to talk and talk and talk and make our central and singular focus the demographics issue, like we have been doing since 2015, and act as if nothing else is going on, and just be so single-minded in this because everything else is just a distraction. And in fact, it'll all be over soon. And if you want it to go away, well, just stop talking about it. I'm not strawmanning. These are, in some cases, word for word, exactly the points and the arguments that some very prominent voices have put out. And I talked about this in one of my most recent videos. You can watch it. It's The State of Nationalism in Current Year, Part 1. I talked about how some of the most prominent voices in our little sphere were all over the place. Some of them even in support of lockdowns, some of them even in support of getting your injections. Even if you're being coerced or forced, just get one anyway. Don't be a conspiracy theorist. Take off your tinfoil hat. All this kind of stuff, using the very same smearing language that we can expect a blue check on Twitter to use. And it seems like after, again, a year, another year has passed. Another year has been robbed of our lives, and we're still bickering about this. We're still debating the importance of what's going on. I just find this retarded. I just can't believe that we're still having this squabble. But it's because we aren't being serious. And it's because many of us still think of nothing more than making hot takes online. So when I talk about being serious, I mean also that this goes way beyond just, making your hot takes and pleasing your followers and being a content creator. What is happening now is affecting our lives in a more acute and negative way and destructive way than the demographics issue ever did, for most of us. The demographics issue is important, massively so, but it wasn't and it isn't something that affects so many people's lives so personally, whereas this new development, this struggle that we've been dealing with for the past 2 years does. So of course people are going to be more interested in finding ways to survive in this situation, finding ways to resist. They want to hear what's going on and have some sort of idea of what to make of this insanity, because it's affecting their lives so much. And it's damaging their lives so much, far more than the dinghies crossing the English Channel or washing up on Lampedusa. Not to say that that isn't a problem, but Are you incapable of giving equal importance or understanding the magnitude of two issues, which, by the way, I would argue are completely intertwined? It's not like it's an either-or issue here. You have to either choose demographics or you have to choose medical, flu world order, tyranny. They are connected. They are both pieces on this chessboard. They are both pieces on the chessboard that belong to our enemy, and our enemy is moving these pieces with the objective of destroying us. And, as I will get to later, most of humanity, to be honest. Not just us, we European peoples. And, it might be said, and it has been said to me on a few occasions, like, why do you care so much? So you have to have an injection, and there's this new health passport, injection passport that you'll have to show to go places. What? You have a regular passport, why doesn't that bother you? You have a social security card, why doesn't that bother you? And my response has always been, well, I wasn't around, I wasn't alive to complain about the imposition of a regular passport to travel, or to oppose the imposition of a social security number in order to be registered in a government system, a database, what have you. I'm alive now, and so I can oppose now what I think is something that is not right, not just, not necessary, and has very dark and nefarious purposes, I believe, and from my perspective. And even if I was okay with your typical passport, social security numbers, and things like that, well, I'm drawing the line now, and I'm drawing the line here. I don't want a digital identity which is linked to my bi-monthly injection certificate. I'm drawing the line here. This is as far as I want the government control of my life to go. This is as far as I want the intrusion of technology in my life to go. I don't want this. And I'm drawing the line here. And there's a whole host of reasons why I don't want this particular injection to have this particular type of passport, type of identification, to be allowed to go places and do things and prove my identity and prove that I am who I say I am, and etc., etc. It really is that simple now. And we don't need to make this more complicated. We don't need to argue about whether China is involved or whether China is based or whether it's a grand conspiracy or whether it's just incompetent politicians who are scrambling to figure out what to do. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. See the world as it is and act accordingly. I don't know all of the ins and outs. I am not permitted to see behind the curtain, and nor are any of us. All I can see is that people are losing their livelihoods, losing hope, losing their friends, losing even the small things in life that gave them just a little bit of meaning and happiness. Suicides are increasing. Entire generations of children are being wasted and developing God knows what kinds of psychoses and mental disabilities and learning disabilities and trauma. And it's time to say that enough is enough. I'm drawing the line here. So we have to be serious. Stop worrying about the takes. You don't have to impress anyone with your intelligence and your insight. And continuing on the theme of being serious about this, and I will make this part is for all of you, whether you're on Team Pure Blood or whether you've had your injections, but now I'm not judging you if you've had them, and I hope everything goes well for you. But maybe you've had your injections and you were coerced, you were forced, you didn't know what else to do. And now, or even maybe not even now, maybe during the whole time you've known that it's wrong. This should not be a coerced or forced medical procedure, and we shouldn't be ostracizing and persecuting those who don't participate in this medical procedure. I consider you on our team, on Team Pure Blood, even if you got your jabs. But if you want this all to end, if it can be ended, well, you have to, I think, in this year, I said I wasn't going to make predictions, but I think in this year, be prepared to make sacrifices. And, the theme of sacrifice, it's an interesting one. In the past, in the old religions, the people would make sacrifices to their gods for all sorts of reasons. Many times it was to say thank you. But on other occasions, the sacrifice was made in anticipation or in expectation or sort of in exchange, you might say, for reward. You make a sacrifice so that you have a bountiful harvest. You make a sacrifice so that you are victorious in battle. The value of a sacrifice is not in what is sacrificed. The value of the sacrifice is in what is earned because of the sacrifice. What are you willing to sacrifice in order to earn the reward for having made that sacrifice? The reward, if we make a sacrifice, the reward is living on our terms. The reward is putting a spanner in the works of this maniacal globalist regime and this health dictatorship, this dictatorship of the billionaire class, the incompetent elites, the pharmaceutical industry, and all the rest of them. It's time to get serious because things are serious. I don't know how much more we're going to be able to tolerate. You cannot shut down the economies of entire countries. You cannot choke up supply lines. You cannot tell farmers to slaughter entire livestock and just waste it all because there's no butchers, because there's no drivers, because there's no transport to get the animal, the meat, to the markets to be purchased. The whole system is collapsing. And it might not manifest itself in your life yet. Or maybe it has. Maybe you have seen fewer items in the supermarket, higher prices in the supermarket, higher prices for prime material. Maybe you haven't. But the fact is, what has happened cannot be undone, and the effects will come eventually. And they aren't going to be like anything we've seen. I think this is going to outdo the 2008 financial crisis. It's going to be really messy. And so I don't know how much we can put this off. It's time to get serious. It's time to make some sacrifices. Are you prepared now to, for example, stop complying? Are you prepared to maybe relocate? Are you prepared to maybe resist? Are you prepared to march? Although I've made my views on marches and protests clear, but it's still a good way to meet people and network and show force, show numbers, and maybe even kick the can down the road and buy some time. Change some minds. Change the date of the mandatory jab in order to work from the 10th of January to the 10th of February. We bought another month. Okay. It's good enough for now. This is going to be a war of attrition. So this is a call to men and women of action and principle. Men and women who are willing to do what needs to be done, who are willing to make that sacrifice in order to earn the reward, who want to live free, live on their terms, who want to protect their children from this crushing system, this hypocrisy, this incoherency. This is a call to you. Because the consequences, for those of you who might not get the gravity of the situation, for those of you who might not have suffered any consequences, the consequences of not resisting, the consequences of continuing to comply, the consequences of brushing this off as just a distraction. Oh, it's just incompetent politicians. It'll all go away. Stop talking about it. Futures are being snuffed out. They're being robbed. People who would be planning a family, people who would be planning to open their own business, people who would be planning to get their degree, study universities, make something of their life, are seeing it all going up in smoke. Many people have their life on pause. It's like a video game on pause. They don't know what to do anymore. This is what happens when you remove spontaneity and adventure and freedom, liberty from people's lives. This is what happens when there's just so much negativity, negative vibes in the world. You cannot create opportunities, and you do have to create them. You cannot create opportunities if you can't even go out. If you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything. And if you are pure blood, you really can't do a whole lot. I've lived in a way that is entirely contrary to my philosophy of life for the past 2 years. Before all this, I used to be a person who would literally throw a dart at a map and just go. I would hitchhike. I would go out every weekend and be very sociable, and I would flirt, and I would talk to strangers and get to know people and take chances, take risks, be spontaneous, be adventurous, see where life takes you, see where opportunity arises, what doors open. Well, for the past 2 years, I haven't really been able to do any of that. And there hasn't been much opportunity in my life to take advantage of. In fact, the opposite. Opportunities have been snuffed out. And I know I'm not the only one. I've spoken to many people. I've spoken to so many people who are contemplating suicide, who are having suicidal thoughts enter their mind for the first time in their lives. They'd never had these thoughts before. They'd never been like this, but now they're looking at life and they're thinking, oh, it's just so meaningless. What's the point? There's no hope. People have been robbed of hope. Now, I'm going to read something that I posted on my Telegram a while back, a few months ago, and it's about the consequences of what's going on. And like I said, I wasn't going to make predictions in this video. This isn't a prediction. It's just something I wrote that's sort of imagining what this all leads to and why it matters. So this is something I wrote a few months ago. When you understand that history is cyclical rather than linear and always moving towards progress, that civilizations rise, fall, and reform into something new in a never-ending cycle, you may perhaps feel better about your place in that cycle. You may realize that the cycle is necessary, and that while it may be unpleasant to live during the fall stage, there will always be the rebirth stage. There will always be the possibility that something will emerge, something new, and perhaps even more glorious than the thing that preceded it. Hard times make good men, etc. But there is another stage in the cycle, one that completes, or perhaps it's more accurate to say terminates, the cycle. It's the stage of extinction, and it's what I'm afraid awaits not just Western kind, but all of humanity. There are several examples of civilizations which have suffered the extinction phase. For some, like the Aztecs or the Atlanteans, the process was cataclysmic and catastrophic. More often, however, the process is long and unnoticeable until eventually there is hardly any living trace of the people who formed the erstwhile civilization. If the fate of the West were simply to pass through the cycle of rise, fall, and rebirth, reformation, without having to meet the terminal phase of extinction, perhaps I'd feel more optimistic, more tranquil, like the enlightened person I mentioned earlier, who understands and embraces this cycle. But I feel, and perhaps you feel it too, that we're facing extinction, and that this is why we are so uneasy and see the future as nothing but grim. There are two reasons why I think Europeans, and eventually all humanity, is in danger of extinction. The first is obvious. Europeans make up a tiny fraction of the human population and our already small number relative to those other populations is decreasing. Not only decreasing, but we are being wiped out and replaced in our own and only homelands. Troy fell, but Aeneas and a handful of Trojans survived, and, according to legend, became the progenitors of the Romans. Rome fell, but the Romans survive today in the genome of modern Italians and many populations. The Roman Empire arose from the fall in its new form, the Holy Roman Empire. The European nations arose. Europe after Rome was reborn into something perhaps even more mighty and more glorious, one might argue. The point being that as long as the people survived and continued to pass on their genetics and biospirit, the civilizations founded and nurtured by those people only experienced the cycle of fall followed by rebirth. What happens when the people don't survive? Extinction. What will happen to Western civilization if our numbers continue to fall and our kind continues to be replaced? There won't be a reformation or rebirth of our civilization because we won't be around to continue the cycle. This also spells doom for the rest of humanity, as it is clear that the blessed European man has been the source of almost every great achievement of the human species. Achievements which spread to and throughout the tribes and civilizations of other men, elevating them to new and often improved planes of existence. Arguments about the merits of modernity aside, the simple fact is that over 95% of all technological and medical inventions or discoveries were realized by European men. What will the world be like when he is gone? Reduced to far away, barely traceable blip in the human gene pool. I said to set aside modernity, technology, and their merits. I want to address them now. The final nail in humanity's coffin, and the reason why the cycle won't continue with rebirth and reformation, is the inescapable fact that we are tightening the chains of what can only be described as mankind's universal enslavement. I say tightening the chains because our enslavement is not a condition we are just now experiencing. We have been enslaved and chained for a while. I don't know exactly when, what exact date in history I could point to and say, this is when we all became enslaved. But the creation of central banks in the 19th and 20th centuries is a good place to start. With the ubiquity of smart technology, the surveillance state, the advent of AI, transhumanism, and the New World Order, which is based on the Fourth Industrial Revolution, we are seeing mankind sink further into a swamp which he won't be able to crawl out of. Wet and exhausted, but at least alive and free. Instead, the man of extinction is trapped in giant cityscapes. His ability to dream, to make spontaneous decisions, is no more. His connection to nature goes no further than seeing the occasional row of trees planted amongst the asphalt and concrete and skyscrapers. He is constantly monitored, constantly plugged into the throbbing, pulsating waves of 5G towers. His attention is always in demand. Never a moment for pause, reflection, creation. Indeed, soon he won't even recognize a desire for those things. He won't know that he needs them. He is constantly injected with concoctions that weaken his immune system and render him dependent on the centralized powers of the New World Order just to live without suffering painful or life-threatening diseases. His health and well-being is further degraded by his diet of synthetic, lab-grown meat products, and even insect-based or plant-based foods, processed foods, that even a hungry dog turns its nose at. His only motivation is looking forward to the 6 days of vacation he's allowed to enjoy, if he's lucky to get and or afford that many. And when he goes on his vacation, he won't even notice or be bothered by the fact that everywhere is the same. The same music, the same people, the same food, the same buildings, the same behavioral protocols and regulations. Many humans all over the world have been living like this for some time, enslaved by the banks, enslaved by technology, enslaved by the state. But at least there were ways of escaping. There were pockets of the world where people could live with as little interaction with the system as possible. They could live in nature. They could live in safe and prosperous societies in small villages and towns. Enjoy the pleasure of a spontaneous walk in the woods or a raucous night in the pub with good company. Now, with the onset of this new world order, one world governance of global homo, and the fusion of the digital with the biological, I don't see how we will still have those things that make us human. The 5G towers, digital identity systems, surveillance cameras everywhere, and the hordes of lesser humans whose purpose is to explode like human biological weapons and destroy the safe and functioning society will come and are coming to the towns and villages. When the globalist vision of existence is finally and fully realized, and I don't see anything stopping it, what way back will mankind have? What potential for a rebirth can there be? There is no escape. Or have you become so used to the word globalism that you've forgotten just what the first 6 letters refer to? Therefore, the unavoidable future of humanity is to be nothing more than cattle, forever, controlled by the herders in Silicon Valley, in Brussels, in Beijing. The necessary human spirit needed for rebirth will be extinguished, as will be the race of human most capable of rising again and creating something new, continuing the cycle. If it weren't for the looming figure of technological tyranny and the fusion of the digital with the biological, I could continue to believe in the cycle of history. I could believe that this ugly, dumb, and shallow civilization would meet its end just as countless others did, and a new and better civilization would slowly emerge. But that must happen organically. That only happens because nature is the guide. Because men are free to be men, to unleash all their qualities, both of creation and destruction, as they forge a new world for themselves from the rubble of the old one. If we lose that, if we become chained to the wall of technocracy, artificial intelligence, transhumanism, and a one-world global governance system which behaves very much like a communist state, then the human race is finished. Bit long, but worth sharing. That is, I think, the destination we're heading to if we fail to act. If we fail to be men and women of action. Not just talk, not just hot takes and unique insights shared online. Never give up. Never give in. Keep doing what you can. Keep waking up normies, or trying to at least. And yes, as I said in the previous video I made, I believe it is possible to wake up normies. I'm an example of that. Many of you are examples of that. Many of us did not come into this world with these thoughts. Many of us had to learn, in some cases, the hard way, the red-pilled truths that we've now become so familiar with. So, do continue. Speak. I can tell you, for my part, I don't hold my tongue anymore. And I just don't. In the past I might have, but this now matters to me a lot. Like I just explained, the consequences of being quiet far outweigh the consequences of speaking out. And always remember, though, why do we want to wake up the normies? Why do we want to try to get people to see what's going on and see the truth and pull back the curtain so that we reach a critical mass and have the numbers to resist and perhaps thwart this regime? It's not about waking up the normies for the sake of waking up the normies. We want there to be a path between our discourse and action. And also, always remember that it's not about waking up all the normies, because it's not about waking up all the sheep. It's about waking up the lions, a few select lions who will be the ones that carry out action. And I think we are approaching a time where we will be called into action. Whether it is finally speaking out, even at the cost of losing your status in society, or losing your friends, and not getting invited to the next wine dinner, or whether it's not complying, whether it's making a sacrifice, giving up that degree you were going for, giving up a job you really wanted in order to live free, in order to thwart the system and its plans. Because the regime has only a few weaknesses. What weaknesses it does have are built in because of the dependence of our compliance. Right now, the most effective strategy we have remains disobedience, non-compliance. It doesn't mean that it's a strategy that will result in victory, but it is a strategy that is most practical here and now. I don't know what the future holds. I mean, I could predict, I guess. But as far as what we can do in order to get some wins, I'm not totally sure. But in order to, like I said, buy some time, throw a spanner in the works, in order to do that, the best strategy is non-compliance. Not marches and protests and lashing out and just asking for them to bring down the hammer on us and pass laws about what we can do online, or laws about how many people can gather, and laws banning protests. Just non-compliance. Don't offer your QR code. Don't put on the mask. Don't require that the customers in your shop have to show their COVID pass. That, I think, is a form of action that can be taken now. Ultimately, however, I think revolution and an overthrow of the regime is necessary. I'm not sure how it will come about. Probably things will have to get a lot worse. Our goal now is to be of sound physical health and to be as independent as possible so that when the time comes and things get worse, we are all right and we can join in, or who knows, even lead the revolution and the overthrow of this unjust, maniacal, and evil regime. But to do that, we must be ruthless and cunning about these things. No more idealism, no more bickering, no more pontificating, no more hot takes and black pill, white pill roller coaster, things I talked about in the last video I made months ago. We have to stop wishing the world was as we want it and simply see it for what it is and act accordingly. I don't know what more can be done in the here and now, except, again, just keep your heads high, don't give up, don't give in, hold the line, stand by your values, stand by those you can trust, stand by those who depend on you, protect yourself, protect your families, your loved ones, and try to be in a position of good health, physically, financially, be independent of the system as much as possible so that when we fight against it, when there is a real fight against it, it won't affect you negatively and you can then participate in the fight against it. I don't know what it will look like. I don't know. It's a very strange time to be in. It's not as simple as it was in the past where you could just get have your call to arms and rally the people and fight back against the tyrants. It seems to be a lot bigger and the stakes are a lot higher and everything is so complicated. And again, do many of us even know who the enemy really is? I do my part in trying to get this clarified as much as possible to those of you who watch these videos. But I wanted to just talk about what's going on now and say that ultimately what we can do now is simply not comply. Again, I repeat it, just don't worry about visions of revolutions and overthrowing that may come, even in our lifetime. Maybe it will come soon. Maybe it will come in another generation. I don't know. Neither do you. And so I often see that everyone's asking, what can we do? And they get very black pill because it seems like there's no solution. The solution is don't comply, don't give in, hold the line, talk to as many people, make your criticisms of what's going on heard, do not be afraid, speak out, be prepared to make sacrifices, be mentally in a place where you accept that you might have to give some things up, make some changes that you didn't want to make, change your concept, your vision that you had of your future, your desires, your hopes and dreams. Maybe make some changes to them. But keeping in mind that the sacrifice is always to earn the reward of living free, living on your terms. All right, guys, let me know what you think. Let me know how you're all doing. And if you have anything else to add, feel free to do so in the comments. I hope you're all doing well. And like I said, even if you're on Team Pureblood or not, if you've got the injections or not, but you're on our side, you're on the side of liberty, and you're on the side of our survival, I consider you a part of our team, our movement, you're a comrade, and I wish you all well. And I know how difficult things have been for a lot of you, and just keep your head up. I know it's fucking hard, but don't give up, don't give in, and I guess that's it. All right, everyone, take care. See you next time.